Well, I would like to start off by thanking Geshe Lektor for hosting this talk, for the Tibetan Library being the place for this talk. It's a great honor for me to be here. And I want to thank all of you for showing up on this cold and gray day to hear about a topic that is a little bit unusual. So I would also, before I get into the talk, I want to do a special thank you to my new friend Norman Steinberg, who has helped me in many, many ways and is helping people locally. Norman, thank you very much. You are a bodhisattva. In reality and in training, yes. So, my background, even though I come from a Jesuit Catholic university, a Department of Theology and Religious Studies, my background is in cultural anthropology. And many times cultural anthropology and theology do not get along very well, partly because of the tools that we use to study religion. So today I know we have many people from many different backgrounds. I will try to speak slowly. If you are having trouble understanding me, please just put your hand in the air and say, slow down, or too complicated, and I will try to repeat. So please, if you don't understand something, just raise your hand and let me know. All right, so we are going to try in the next 45... yes, this is for distribution. I want one copy for myself. Yes. So we have an outline of the talk. And I'm sorry, the font is very small. I had many technical challenges to pull this together, which I will not bore you with, but good practice, good spiritual practice to deal with technology before a talk, and the time is running out.
You have enough space.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. When I created the flyer for this talk, I emphasized a few key points. So here are the points that we will try to cover. So basically, the talk is organized into 5 main topics. Your outline has 10 topics. Maybe we will talk about all 10, maybe 8, but certainly we will talk about these 5 right here. My background, as I said, as a cultural anthropologist, is focused on how society and culture interact and shape our idea of being human, shapes our ideas of the world, shapes our ideas of our bodies, and also shapes our ideas about religion and religious practice. So I thought maybe to get started, we would have a very quick comparison between culture and society. Culture gives us our mother tongue, and this linguistic foundation really shapes our concept of the world and how we think the world operates. Our basic culture gives us values, morality. It provides a type of psychological orientation to the world. Who am I as a person? It gives us a sense of security and a feeling of home. But at the same time, it can also give us a sense of vulnerability, of being defensive against the outside world coming into my culture, our culture, and we have to keep it away. Society provides institutions, provides infrastructure. Society establishes and enforces boundaries. And when I talk to my students, they say, oh, this is so confusing. Culture, society, I can't tell the difference. I say, just remember, society makes boundaries. Culture travels. culture can travel over those boundaries into new societies, right? So we have many different ethnic food, new ideas, religious ideas, cultural ideas. They travel over the boundaries of geography, law, sometimes even governments, to establish new contexts. Society and culture, they are interactive and they are interdependent with each other. So I think it's confusing. Yes, it is confusing, but they are so important because it's really culture and society that shape our place in the world today. So let me give you an example about culture. Many times we don't understand how culture works, especially our own culture. So, for example, here I have, well, I'll use this. This is much better. Nice, clear, clean water. All right? So I take a drink of it. Ah, refreshing. Now, in this water, I spit right in the top. Now, on top of this water, something from inside my mouth is floating on top of the water. Can I drink it? Of course. The water is clean. The saliva from my mouth, it's clean, but it's in the wrong place. Our culture says, no, you cannot drink it. Now it's dirty. So this is an easy example of how culture shapes our emotional response, sometimes our intellectual response. We don't know why, but if you spit in this and then I say, drink it, you say, ooh, no. It's your spit, it's your water, but it's dirty. Now it's dirty. So that's culture. That's how culture can work on our consciousness in a way that we are not aware. All right. It's kind of a dramatic example. Kind of silly example too. When we talk about culture, of course, we talk about diversity of cultures, a pluralism of cultures. And so when we think about Buddhism and culture, we have to also think about pluralism. And Geshe Lakdor already mentioned this is a very, very important theme. And actually, in Buddhist studies at the university, this is an increasingly important theme that people are investigating. So when we talk about pluralism in Buddhism, I always tell my students, there's no such thing as Buddhism. There's no such thing as Christianity. There is no such thing as Islam, because all of these religions are pluralistic religions. Yes, they have core traditions and core teachings, but the way that they exist in the world is in a pluralistic manner. Okay? So, maybe you noticed on the flyer, I like to put an S. Buddhisms. It doesn't sound good, it doesn't sound cool, it doesn't sound sexy, but I think it's more accurate because it gives us a better picture of how Buddhism actually works in the world. Everywhere, religion is shaped by local, regional, ethnic, political, educational cultures. Everywhere. We cannot deny this. We cannot escape it. But many people, they think they are practicing a kind of pure religion. And this is a real problem in our world because that type of belief quickly becomes a political belief. I am pure, you are not pure. I am superior, you are inferior. That is a real problem in our world today. That goes against pluralism. In the singular, when we use the word Buddhism in the singular, without being aware, oh yes, Buddhism is this, Buddhism is that, we really are taking a risk because this word cannot handle, cannot carry all of the diversity that we see in the world today. And I think it leads to a kind of rigid thinking and a kind of fundamentalism. So it sounds very strange to talk about Buddhist fundamentalism, but we do find places here and there where people are very rigidly attached to their type of practice. And they think their practice is superior to other people's practice. Maybe in some ways there is a better way to practice this particular teaching. But to have a strong, a kind of righteous ideal is really not very productive. All right. Here are 4 very traditional images from Japan. My area of research is Japan, so I'm going to use some examples from Japan. And when I was there doing research about a crisis in Japanese Buddhism, I was trying to understand how can I organize all of this diversity. Buddhism has been in Japan for about 1,500 years. Okay? Basically, there are 7 types of Buddhism in Japan. And these 7 types of Buddhism, sometimes they cooperate with each other. Usually, they do not communicate with each other. But all types of Buddhism that I was finding in Japan, they are having the same kinds of problems, basically the same crisis. Younger people in their 20s and 30s, they do not want to participate in Buddhism like their parents or their grandparents. They do not want to be involved in a temple. They do not want to pay money to a temple on a yearly basis. Why? Because the temple does not help them with their lives. The priest at the temple does not communicate with them, does not reach out to them. The priest is usually an older person. The younger people say, I have nothing in common with that person. Buddhism has no significance for me. It has no relevance for me. So, therefore, I have no religion. This is common in Japan, very, very common. So, temples, many temples, they try to look contemporary, but inside the temple, it's still old-fashioned. It's for older people, and it's especially for funerals and memorial services. So look at, I'm not going to read this, look at the public opinions about priests. Very negative. This is painful to read. Priests are dull and insensitive to begin with. Oh, ouch, that hurts. That's not true. Priests go to universities, priests study hard, they work hard, but they have forgotten how to communicate with a wide range of people. So we find, again, priests who are, they're trapped between a kind of traditional image. The priest is ascetic, has a strong religious practice. The priest conducts rituals in an expert way. He's a scholar. And the priest also should be connected to society. Many of you know in Japan, priests can marry and have families. So that's very radical. And there's a political reason for that, which I will not go into. But here you see the graves, which are extremely important. 80% of the income of the revenue from a priest comes from funerals and memorial services. So they really depend upon people dying. A person that I asked, I said, well, if you wanted to know more about Buddhism, where would you go? He said, well, I would never go to the temple in my neighborhood. And I would never talk to the priest. I would probably go to the bookstore. all of this diversity all of these different types of Buddhism are trying to cope with this crisis. The younger generation. How can we connect with the younger generation? How can our temples be useful to society? How can Buddhism in Japan be relevant and significant again? So I came up with this idea about experimental Buddhism, because all of these priests and all of these temples, they are trying different things to connect with people. And then I said, well, this is true for Japan, but it's also true for Buddhism around the world. Wherever we find Buddhism, we find teachers and texts, but we also find strategy. A strategy that will connect my kind of Buddhism with a new audience. We also find people who are practicing Buddhism. We find a kind of strategy inside their heads and inside their hearts and inside their spirits. It's a strategy that they also are looking for a way to connect with Buddhist traditions. Maybe not all of the tradition, but some parts of the tradition. Okay? So this is a very important point, which I will come back to in just a moment. All right, so 5 minutes, I'm going to explain what I mean by experimental Buddhism. Well, maybe. Here we go. Okay, first of all, when you conduct an experiment, you have a strategy, you have a plan, it is rational. It is pragmatic. You want to achieve some goal or result. All right? You must choose a certain method. You must choose a certain path. So it is selective. The next part is important because this idea about position. Where are we right now as an institution, or where am I as an individual in my life based upon my social conditions and problems? You know, where am I right now? Can I use technology? Do I need to invest more money or more time? So where am I? This is a kind of GPS, you know, our GPS for our lives and also institutions. An experiment also has agency. So this means a person's will is involved. I am making choice. Me. I am making choices. I am deciding. I am trying to establish a strategy. So this is what we mean by agency. We are very cautious. We negotiate between various options. We say, you know, this looks pretty good. This looks really good. This one not. This looks great. So this negotiation takes place inside an organization, inside an individual, as we are trying to connect with those religious resources which help us, which we think will help us. We don't know yet because it's an experiment, right? We are still creating a strategy. All right, so I have a strategy, I have a method. Now I want to apply the strategy and the method. I apply it, and hopefully the results are favorable. But the results are tangible in this case. And when I say tangible, it means something that I can see right now, something that I can experience right now. I don't have to wait until I die and go to heaven. Oh, okay, then now the results are here in heaven. I am rewarded. No. We're talking about an experiment that has a result. I can see it right now. Maybe the result is negative. Maybe the result is unclear. But it's something I can see. It's something that has a presence in the world. Finally, this last one is reinvention. Reinvention, revitalization. We go back again and again and again. Can I improve my strategy? Can I improve my method? If I do that, maybe the result will be better. So this is what I mean by experimental Buddhism. Okay? And when I was doing research in Japan, I saw all of these over and over and over. Doesn't matter what the tradition is. Pure Land, Zen, esoteric kind of Vajrayana Buddhism in Japan, Shingon Tendai. I saw it everywhere. Okay, so now we are moving to number 7. I'm skipping number 6. I'll come back to number 6 in just a moment. Okay, 5 more minutes. This is kind of boring and very academic, so I'm sorry, but I think it's important. When we are talking about experimental Buddhism, or we're talking about experimentation in science, or in administration, or experimentation in our lives, this is coming from the long process of modernity. And modernity, modernization, modern life, they're all connected but a little bit different. So modernity really begins in the late 1400s with the Italian Renaissance, Galileo, Copernicus, people like this. This is the beginning of modernity. Why? Because we have a separation of religion from science, government, and law. The church did not like Galileo. The church did not like Copernicus, right? But eventually, scientists observing the world could separate from religion. This was very important because what religion says about the world sometimes does not match the scientific view of the world. And His Holiness has said on many occasions, if there is a big difference between the Buddhist explanation and a scientific explanation, we have to find a middle path, a middle way. And sometimes we have to adopt the scientific explanation. The next legacy comes from an emphasis on science, reason, and market economy. Now, all around the world, people think all of this is normal, right? Oh yes, we should have a market economy. I cannot trade my jacket for Geshe Lakdor's beautiful maroon blanket, right? We could, but that's not economic. So this is also part of the legacy. Individualism, I think 200 years from now, when a historian looks at this time, they will say it's emphasis on the individual that is really key, one of the key features. And because it's an individual who chooses, right, to become educated, an individual participates in the economy, but now especially we have great freedom of choice in lifestyle, career, but also this one, religious belief. Many of my students, they say, well, you know, I used to be Catholic, or I used to be Buddhist, or I used to be Christian, but now I don't know, you know, I'm kind of looking around, experimenting. I think this is quite radical, that we have this kind of freedom of belief. It's not always positive. Sometimes it's very, very negative, and sometimes it has a type of risk associated with it. But it has certainly created new institutions, new technologies, new ways of living. Also, it's created new types of social malaise, social problems. His Holiness, when he first came to the United States, he said, what is this people are talking about? Self-esteem. It's the value you have about yourself. He said, I'm not sure what this self-esteem means. Americans are so rich, so educated, they have good hospitals, good roads, and people have low self-esteem. He said, I just don't understand this. But it is a new type of social problem, that we can be rich, healthy, well-educated, comfortable, safe, and still we have a negative impression of myself as a human being, right? That's something new, something new. Especially to this scale that we have it today. Okay, that was 5 minutes, all right. So, some new trends, yes. I'll just put these up quickly. In the academic study of religion, these are really important trends that affect religious practice. And Buddhism is affected as well. We've been talking about pluralism, individualism, detraditionalization. Okay, we will see an example of this in just a moment when we're talking about meditation taking place outside the monastery in the world. Secularism, this is the separation of religion from government, law, actually from society. And of course, the importance of the internet and social media, because it gives access to so many people around the world. Oh, the picture. This is an example of a new religion in Japan called Happy Science. This is the name of the religion. Happy Science. Science will make you happy. Not religion. Science will make you happy. We have a religion about science making you happy. So they have lots of money. They made a documentary film about the rebirth of the Buddha. And did you know the Buddha is in heaven? And the Buddha is going to come down like a laser beam into Tokyo? That was their documentary film. Not a documentary, it was a feature film. I tried to watch it, but it was very bad. They spent lots and lots of money on it. Well, one of the things that Buddhism is good at is upaya, or skillful means, right? We can develop a strategy of effective communication. So here is one of my friends and colleagues who tries to communicate to a very broad audience about key principles in Japanese Buddhism. But he also serves as a consultant to temples and advertising companies. So he created this advertising campaign. Look, temple. Eat, temple. Buy, temple. Okay, now you may say, what? This is not religious. There's nothing about Buddhism here. But is there? It's upaya, right? Skillful strategy to connect with people. So maybe people will come to the temple, they say, oh, it's a beautiful place, nice. Oh, temple food, it's very delicious, I like it. And temple beads or books or incense, I can buy that, I can be a consumer. The temple is cool. And then maybe they will become more involved in the temple. So you can see the strategy, how that works. So this is Reverend Shaku. Another type of experimentation that takes place is what I call Buddhist-inspired activism. Many people use this term, engaged Buddhism, socially engaged Buddhism, but I argue against these words because I don't think they are very accurate. Buddhism has always been engaged with society. There is a reciprocity between monastery and society. Very, very important all throughout history. If we use this, then we have an emphasis on activism and actors, agency, people, individuals. Now, again, this is a selective process to find Buddhist themes, values that inspire and guide action. This can be very positive, right? But it can also be negative. So let's see some examples here. Okay, well. So in Japan, because many young people have lost a sense of worth, and they are searching for meaning, sometimes they cannot find a type of meaning that they believe in. So they say, my life is full of suffering and pain. I'm going to kill myself. So, one person every 16 minutes kills themselves, commits suicide. In Japan, for 12 years, over 12 years, it's been over 30,000 people every year. And not only young people, of course, also middle-aged people and old people. But this is a very severe problem in Japan. And so many priests have become very active in reaching out to people, doing counseling, advising, mental health. This is a very good thing. Here is a priest who, he started off as a businessman, and he thought Buddhism was ridiculous. And then he fell in love with the daughter of the priest of this temple, and he said, I would like to marry your daughter. The priest says, fine, but you have to become a Buddhist priest. And he said, well, okay. I know that sounds radical here, but he has been very, very active. He and a nonprofit organization, they purchased this apartment building. The owner of the apartment building, he lost all of his money. The price of the building was very cheap, so they bought the building. They turned it into a care facility for elder people, and then it also is a hospice. All right? So we have elderly living, medical care, and then also a hospice. So now the same priest, he said, well, that's good for old people. What about young people? What about middle-aged people? How can we reach them? So he started a pub. And one of the things that you are not supposed to do in Buddhism is to indulge in intoxicants, right? But according to the priest, he says, well, if I wait in the temple for people to come to the temple, nobody's going to come. I have to get into the river. I have to go into the muddy river of suffering. That's where people are. And that's how I will tell them about Buddhism. All of the drinks have Buddhist names. And so when you order a drink, you say, I would like the drink of lust and suffering. Oh, okay, that's wild turkey. And then the priest, he explains, well, what's the problem with lust and suffering? And it's a good moment to teach. So, this is difficult field work, difficult research, but not so bad. Yeah. Okay, here's another rather radical example. This is a very large temple in Tokyo. And many priests from different traditions, they all came together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different traditions came together. They said, how can we reach young people? How can we make young people excited about Buddhism? So they said, all right, we are going to have a big event at this temple. We will open a cafe serve food, Buddhist food, but the main idea for this temple is a fashion show. All these priests wear different colors, different robes, and so the fashion show is going to promote sustainable consumerism and interdependence. Many NPOs came together. There was African drumming and hip-hop, a cafe, and a chance for people to talk to Buddhist priests outside the temple face to face. Very unusual in Japan. So the fashion show looked like that. Isn't that fantastic? So these are different kinds of Buddhism, right? And I'm sorry I don't have the sound, but in the background we should have African drumming going on. And then we also have people doing hip-hop rapping. Okay? But the rapping is about a Buddhist topic. We are all connected, we are interdependent. Yo, we go to right? And so the priests, they go on the 20,000 people attended. So it was a great success. However, the priest at the temple, which one is he? He was the main organizer. He got fired because other temples in his denomination, they said, this is bad. This is not Buddhism. This is not our tradition. So somebody is responsible. He has to go. Now, you think about it. Who is really thinking about the future? Who is really helping Buddhism? The conservative priests or the young priest who tried something new and made 20,000 people excited about Buddhism? Think about it. We are still talking about Buddhist-inspired activism. And I will just go through this very quickly. You remember 2011, the terrible disaster in Japan, how temples were very damaged, but many of them, they served as evacuation shelters. Buddhist priests were very active in helping people deal with this tragedy. But there is a separation between what happened next. This is the nuclear disaster that we still worry about, still very dangerous. 2012, we have over 100,000 people in Tokyo protesting against nuclear power. But Buddhist priests are not participating. So somehow there is a political boundary. Yes, I can help people recover from a tragedy, but I should not become politically active. However, I think there is plenty of resources within Buddhism to become active. Buddhist-inspired activism is not always positive because people are selecting, choosing from tradition to fulfill their goals. So here we have a rather shocking picture, 1944 in Japan, priests carrying guns because their temple, this is a temple near Kyoto, has told them you must defend Buddhism. You must defend Japan. And so they take up guns. 2013, do you remember what happened earlier this year in Myanmar? So here is another type, you could say it's Buddhist-inspired activism. These monks created a network to be politically outspoken against the Muslim minority. And they say Buddhism requires us to do this because we are defending our Sangha, We are defending our temple. We are defending the Dharma from the Muslims who are coming into Buddhism. And if you know the details, you know that some of the monks were also involved in acts of violence against the Muslims. And I'm sorry to show this, but I think the abduction of the Panchen Lama is also an example of how Buddhist-inspired activism can be so negative, because it's the Chinese coming up with their own Panchen Lama. They are experimenting, looking at the resources available to them. They have a clear strategy. They have a clear goal. And it's very painful to think about this. But I think the idea of experimental Buddhism helps us to identify the strategy involved in this type of political action. Okay, we are now at number 9, D. And I have about 10 more minutes. So we are going to conclude here in just a moment. When we think about experimentation, religion, culture, and society, this historical moment, 2013, 2014, 2015, actually you could say from 25 forward. This is a very, very unique historical moment. And it's unique because we have so many resources available to people around the world, right? We have Buddhist teachers. We have Buddhist texts. We have Buddhist places, holy places, sites, available now, accessible through transportation. We have DVDs. We have audio. We have movies. So many ways to learn about Buddhism. This is very recent, very unique for the 20th century, 21st century. Here is one example of a type of Buddhist, you could say Buddhist-inspired activism, Buddhist-inspired method that has completely gone away from Buddhist religious context. So it's called MBSR. John Kabat-Zinn, has anybody heard of him? He really has a wonderful book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. Great title. I encourage you to read it. But he pioneered this idea that meditation can help with all types of physical and mental problems, and we really don't need Buddhism in between. So, for example, this website, if I could go down, the next one would say, reawakening to what you really are. Reawakening to what you really are. That sounds like the Dharma, right? You have Buddha nature inside you. You want to awaken to your Buddha nature. We hear this all the time in Buddhist teachings. But now it's not talking about teachings. It says mindfulness meditation. This is something you already have in your body, in your mind. It is a resource available and waiting to be released and used in the service of learning and growing and healing. People participate for reasons such as stress, chronic pain, illness, anxiety, panic, sleep problems, fatigue, high blood pressure, and headaches. Nothing to do about religion, right? Nothing to do about Buddhism. And yet it's using a Buddhist technique shared by many types of Buddhism to promote medicine, healthcare, and the social good. Another example, taking this type of meditation into public schools. And I must say, I have been involved in this organization since 2007. This is in Oakland, California, and you can see 150,000 students have been taught this basic type of meditation. We do not use the word meditation. I don't think we use it. No. We say mindfulness. Do you know why we don't say meditation?
Because that has a religious connotation?
Right. Meditation connects with religion. And when you are going into a public school, you should not talk about religion. We have seen, there's about, I think the number is 6,500 teachers that have been trained. And the results are amazing. The data continues to grow about how students say, I feel like I can control my emotions. Somebody calls me, hey, you stupid jerk. I don't hit him. I take a breath, I step back, and I realize he has the problem, not me. This is actually a teaching, one of Shantideva's teachings about Bodhisattva, right? When another person insults you, it's their karma, their difficulty. Don't be trapped by that. So this organization, again, it is promoting mindfulness and education, and it's having a positive difference, not only in it's all types of schools, especially low income and poor children coming from poor families who have a history of domestic violence, violence in their neighborhood, emotional disturbance. These children really respond to it. So this is, again, it's a type of experimental Buddhism. We started in 2006, and we tried this, we tried that, we tried this, we tried that, and finally, now we have, over 12,000 people on Facebook. Not so many, but still not bad. Very, very optimistic about this. So let's see, my final comments. When we talk about an enlightened understanding of the world and our lives in it, enlightened understanding in the European context goes back to the 15th, 14th century, right? An enlightened person is a person who is scientific, a person who is reasonable, rational, a person who is connected to the economy, and really, that is what we mean by enlightened. We have a variety of Buddhist concepts about enlightenment, but most concepts of enlightenment, they talk about suffering and alleviating suffering and non-attachment. My students always think, it's just amazing, they think enlightenment, you become enlightened and then your job is done. Nothing changes. Enlightenment is a permanent state of being. And I say, well, I don't know. I'm not enlightened, but I think we should look for enlightened behavior over and over and over that repeats itself. That's a good judge of enlightenment, not a description, not some title, but enlightened behavior. Nagarjuna has a very profound teaching in the fundamental verses on the middle way, where he is talking about how to navigate the world, how to be in the world. And he says, I have been talking in this teaching about a variety of categories, but he says these categories, they are also empty of inherent existence. This is a type of map, I guess. A category can be a map that helps us to navigate the world we live in. But Nagarjuna is saying, do not mistake the category for reality. The category is empty. And thanks to my colleague, David McMahon, whose name is on the 10a, he pointed out that Nagarjuna understands the relativity of cultural contexts. Because Nagarjuna said, things arise from causes and conditions, right? That's culture. That's society. And Nagarjuna says, this is empty of inherent existence. There is no absolute system to explain the world in this particular treatise. Many people think, well, this is very disturbing, this is very disorienting, there's no absolute system to explain the world. But on the other hand, I think this can be seen as liberating and empowering. Because now you have an understanding about the importance of cultural context. Things arise from causes and conditions. You can identify what those causes and conditions are. You can develop a strategy to cope with those causes and conditions. And I think this empowers an individual, especially if you can connect with a tradition and a teacher who understands these teachings, these ideas. So the last image I put up here is of a woman Buddhist priest in Japan who is radical because she's a woman as a Buddhist priest. She is experimenting with Buddhist teachings that empower women, get women involved in the temple, and she uses music to do this. She has recorded several CDs, she has a music video, she's very cute, she sings very well. This is all part of her experimentation, her upaya, to bring people into Buddhism so they can understand the Dharma, so they can deal with the suffering and anxiety in their lives. So I will stop right here. Thank you very much for your attention and for coming to